Down with communism. That's the message from citizens in Cuba, as many have taken to the streets to protest the government. Thanks for joining us at 11. I'm Denise Valdez.
And I'm Brian Loftus. These are the large protests on the island in decades as Cubans complain about the lack of food, the lack of medicine. The country facing a crisis aggravated by the COVID pandemic.
Protests have spilled onto the streets really all over the world, including Las Vegas Boulevard. Orko Manna is on the strip tonight with their message. Orko?
Well, Denise and Brian, hundreds of people took to the Las Vegas Strip tonight to stand in solidarity with the protesters in Cuba. For them, this is all about showing their support and also calling on the U.S. government to take action. Around 300 to 400 protesters marched along the Las Vegas Strip Tuesday night. They started at the Boulevard in Sahara and made their way south. Many were holding Cuban flags and also signs saying SOS Cuba. Some protesters drove down the strip in their cars too. This is all in solidarity with the recent unrest in Cuba, resulting in the largest protests we've seen in that country in decades. Protesters there are fighting against the communist regime, which they say has oppressed them for decades. But their calls for justice this time around have been triggered by food shortages, rising prices, and the Cuban government's response to rising COVID-19 infections. Now, communities across the U.S., including here in Las Vegas, have taken to the streets. Protesters we spoke to say they felt compelled to speak out.
I think it's very important for our voice to be heard, since we are such a big country. The more we go out, the better it is. If Cuba is on the streets, we can be on the streets as well. We need everybody to open their eyes, because the reality is that we're hurting a lot.
Protesters are also calling on the U.S. government to intervene to help the people of Cuba. President Biden released a statement Monday saying in part, quote, "The United States calls on the Cuban regime to hear their people and serve their needs at this vital moment," end quote. But it's unclear if any policy changes relating to Cuba will be on the horizon. Now, Metro police officers were following along with the protesters as they marched south on this strip to make sure people stayed safe, and it appears everything remained peaceful tonight. Reporting live on the Las Vegas Strip, Orko Manna, 8 News Now.